Web 2.0 is generally seen as a new second generation of applications that you can use on the internet, or at least web-based applications in some way or another. So Web 2.0 is different from what we used to call Internet 2.0. Internet 2.0, which was talked about a few years ago, is more on the nuts and bolts of the internet, the routers and the switches and the cables, etc. Web 2.0 is more focused on the applications you use and the way you use the internet. So Web 2.0 becomes much more suddenly about user participation, user sharing, and bringing the user into the core of what you're doing on the internet. So Web 1.0 was basically about publishing your content. Web 2.0 becomes much more about letting your users collaborate in the content and add to the content. Web 2.0 is potentially very significant to enterprises, and it is in many ways. First of all, there's the way they adopt it externally. So there's the way they use Web 2.0 and Web 2.0 services and applications to reach their customer base and to get their message into the mass market. Web 2.0 in that respect becomes very much a marketing tool, becomes a way of interacting with their customers, and becomes a way of imaging and branding themselves. Internally, you can also use Web 2.0 internally, and that's more a focus on how you do business internally, how your workflow works internally. So that's more a way of making sure that your employees collaborate as well as they can, that they network with each other, that they get a sense of network feeling with each other, a community feeling, and that they actually even further than that start doing that with their customers and supply chains, etc. as well. Well, enterprises need to, of course, first figure out what the potential usage of Web 2.0 could mean to them and how it would fit into their portfolio of services and products, but also in the way they do business, the way they run their company internally. So they need to know what they're doing and how Web 2.0 could help them before they venture into it. There's a lot of potentially wasted time and effort and money thrown into just adopting Web 2.0 for the sake of it. It tends to happen when something is hyped up in the way that Web 2.0 is, that companies are saying, oh, we must have one too, and then they end up spending money and effort on applications that they may not use, or actually might be the wrong applications for them. So they need to be choosy. They need to look at Web 2.0 applications and pick the ones that would make sense for them. And those could be very different in terms of whether you're looking at Web 2.0 for marketing purposes, or whether you're looking at Web 2.0 for direct sales, or whether you're looking at Web 2.0 purely internally in the way your own employees collaborate. Well, one of the key inhibitors we see is awareness. A lot of companies know that there's something called Web 2.0 out there, but they don't necessarily know what it is. So of course the companies like ours and the vendors out there have a lot of work to do in terms of teaching the enterprises in Asia what Web 2.0 is and what the potential benefits from Web 2.0 is. Also, we do see quite a few companies from our own surveys saying that they actually see Web 2.0 as a pure threat to them. So the fact that Web 2.0 is seen as a threat, of course, is a huge potential inhibitor for Web 2.0 adoption. And the main issue typically is security. A lot of companies are worried about security and the security implications that Web 2.0 and all their employees using Web 2.0, social networks, instant messaging, etc., can have not only on their network, but also on the information, the corporate sensitive information. Then there's the issue of control. Most CEOs, CMOs, CXOs in Asia tend to want to retain as much control over their company and the way the company works as possible. If you do largely adopt Web 2.0 internally, there is an element of letting go of that control. You're letting your employees participate more, share more, know more about what's going on in your business, and a lot of Asian enterprises don't want to do that. So that is potentially also a big inhibitor for Web 2.0 adoption. But again, it goes back to knowing what you're doing. First of all, I think there is there's an attitude issue that needs to be addressed. You need to ask yourself, if you're doing this internally, for example, as an organization, do you care about your employees, and do you care about their well-being? Do you care about the way they work together? Do you care about whether they feel that they are part of a community? In most instances you would say yes to all of the above, but when you really dig down to it, you may not actually care as much as you say you do. What does tend to be the issue for most Asian companies is the bottom line, not necessarily your own employees, even though you might say differently. So what they need to do is to ask themselves, how much do they care about their employees, and how much do they care about the way their employees relate to each other and work with each other. If you do care about that, then companies need to look at how this is best catered to. So which tools do they implement that fit into their IT infrastructure, but also fit into their organization in terms of having cross-network cooperation, in terms of having social networks within your organization develop, and how that can further your business, further development in your business, further new services, and further how your employees interact with your customers.